Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to this new edition of the morning briefing. As usual, we start with a recap of yesterday, which was essentially a day of calm, as we had anticipated, given the absence of particularly important macroeconomic data. In short, with the expectation for the important data that we have today, between today and tomorrow. On Friday, what did it bring you? How to frame the day? As we said, the day was within a range, except for a final sprint that led the price to break the ranges that had been created, only to then, after the close, return to the range we were in, and at the moment we are working within it. As we were saying, there are important macroeconomic data this morning. In short, they are being released. The European GDP, the Italian GDP are being released. So all in all, we could definitely see some movement this morning. European. Then we go. So just before the American opening, when we have the non-farm ADP, then we have the US GDP, then there's the personal spending index, there are crude oil inventories, and finally we will have the quarterly reports from Microsoft and Meta. So today is certainly an important day to understand a little bit what the developments might be. From a geopolitical standpoint, regarding the situation in Asia, there are rumors of an initial agreement. For these, in short, with the major competitors, it seems to be, in short, nearing completion. An agreement with India by the United States for, in short, a sort of compromise on the situation in Asia mutually. So we will see what the developments might be. And if, in short, this will lead to new impulses, obviously, after the end of the earnings season of the quarterly reports. In short, soon we will also start to see corporate buybacks again. So these could certainly provide impulses, positive impulses to the market. But, as we were saying, in recent days, it is a market that in the last few days has become a news-driven market again. So we need to be focused and attentive, in short, to the rumors that can circulate and overturn the technical scenarios, which then, in light of these events and situations that go beyond the technical aspects of trading, can certainly lead to significant movements. Okay, with this brief introduction for today, to set the context for the day. So I obviously expect a bit of a trading range throughout this European morning, probably some movement. The peak will be around the release of the data, European GDP, and then, in my opinion, return to this waiting limbo. For these initial data being released at 2:30 p.m. European time, which should be 8:30 a.m. in New York, the IASA's dictated. That said, from an operational point of view, we obviously monitor, starting with the Nasdaq, we monitor the highs recorded yesterday. So this was around 730, which then corresponds to RD0. And on the downside, instead, we definitely monitor the lows recorded yesterday here, just before the opening, so area 19.4. This is the range that I believe should be monitored for potential bullish or bearish breaks. The situation is similar, there's little to add. We are in a waiting phase for ES as well. It slightly breached that 5,6.6 we mentioned, attempting a breakout like the Nasdaq, but then it fell back below. Now it's working slightly above it again. It's just 920 in Italy. And it's working a little below, but under the 2 BC3 levels of closing and opening of the regular trading hour. So a return to this range could easily bring prices back. In short, to a test of this area here, whose breakout could then continue the movement, which, in short, I hope for, because, well, I prefer bullish markets, obviously. To the downside, obviously, we are monitoring the area recorded with yesterday's lows in the 530, 525 range, with this nice pivot here that corresponds to 517. which was formed on Monday and is certainly a good pivot from which one can definitely attempt some longs, waiting to see if the price will go there. So this is the area to monitor on the downside. This is the area to monitor on the upside. Everything is quite simple. Not much has changed since yesterday, so I'm going a bit faster. Faster because there's little to add except for a note of caution and waiting for these upcoming data releases. Meanwhile, I've switched to the Dow Jones, a similar situation. This 41,000 to surpass, which then corresponds to the area between RD0 and RD1. While on the downside, we obviously monitor this area here. Beautiful. On this level, BC3, which is 43, absolutely 43, 43, and 50. So this is the area to monitor on the downside. Now, let's take a look, obviously, at the Russell as well. Here it is. It always finds itself there. In short, it was hovering just above 119.85, so this gives us good hope. An attack at 119.92, therefore the RD0, RD1 area could certainly provide an upward push that might bring prices even beyond the 2000 area, which is that psychological threshold we've mentioned several times. On the downside, we are monitoring this zone, which seems quite evident to me, at 119.50. In short, there's no need to draw lines or anything else. It's quite clear and evident to everyone on all possible and imaginable timeframes. Okay, let's also take a look at the DAX, which has just opened and is slightly pushing a little upwards. The break of 20 to 27, which is the target we roughly set yesterday, and you even reached it, first hitting 26.80. The break of this level here at 27.40 could obviously lead prices to test even 23,000 with a strong bullish push. Perhaps with the data coming out in Europe in the morning, they could certainly provide a positive boost if they are particularly positive and the market interprets them that way. Thank you. On the downside, of course, we are monitoring this level here at 20,600. This corresponds to all these highs here that halted an initial rise. Then they worked on it. So this is definitely the area to monitor between this BC3 level and the other one, certainly the area of interest. A buy attempt, possibly if there should be a test from above. An eventual bullish breakout, on the other hand, could lead, as I mentioned, prices even to the 23,000 area. Okay, let's look at oil, which is pulling back quite a bit. Continuing this bearish movement, breaking that level we had indicated. It came down quite easily, even though a little bit with this movement that we can technically define as a sawtooth, where every possible movement is then completely retraced. However, the trend is definitely downward. We are already working below the BC3 levels, we are not, we are waiting, Today there is also the data on crude oil inventories that could revitalize now the situation. However, the scenario seems quite bearish to me. On oil, it is trying to find a base around the area of 59.50. It is stalling at this BC3 level of the European market opening, so we will see if a potential recovery of this level could lead to a test of these levels. Here again around the area of 69.20, 69, 69.30. The potential failure to hold this area, therefore, with 59.50, 59.30, could certainly lead to further downward pressures. In short, since the movement is quite clear and decisive. Okay. Let's also take a look at gold, of course, which at the moment, Regio, they are working a little bit on this, building a support base after the correction from the highs, which also occurred due to some liquidation of positions by large investors, as we reported in the morning briefing from last weekend. And so this has given a little room. In short, here's a bit of price consideration, also due to some recovery in the stock markets, which certainly have somewhat cooled the enthusiasm that was there for this asset, which remains absolutely in a bullish market. And we will then see the scenarios. In short, at the moment, even the volatility, do you see how it is easing on this asset? At the moment, in short, we are here within the BG3 range. constructed between yesterday afternoon and the close. So holding the downside at 3.3 is crucial, because otherwise we will definitely make a test of areas 3.2 and 75. Journal 3275, whose break should scenarios even down to 3.180, or in short, take it easy, not all in one day. In short, I don't know unless big players come into play to the upside, obviously. So we are monitoring 3335, which seems to be the first 3335, 3340, in short, which seems to be the first significant obstacle, obviously. Then we have this whole area here, which will certainly act as an obstacle between 3550 and 3560. So probably we will see some back and forth there. Thank you. Okay, looked at them too. We have SPX left, which at the moment is obviously mirroring the main American futures, and it remains anchored in this range. Even though yesterday's close for ISP was just above, basically right at the level of 5, and 60, which is the future level. Let's monitor this area because it is definitely the area of interest at the moment. So we'll see if we re-enter this range and thus move downward. Let's monitor this area here of 5,470, 5,465, which is definitely the area of interest for a downward move. On the upside, we monitor this entire area here, as we mentioned, because a break of this area could easily bring prices to the 5,610, 5,640 range. Lastly but not least, let's look at Bitcoin, which at the moment, like all cryptocurrencies in recent days, is experiencing some lateral movements. Without significant cues at the moment, just a bit of the color of goddess of a decline. Tonight perhaps, here to retest precisely this area that we had targeted in the 394, 393 and 5 range, and from here a rise started again, bringing prices back within the BC3 levels. At the moment we are working precisely on the most important levels, more on the most important targets, which are also round number levels in the 95,000 area. The break of 95,000 and the subsequent test that I expect at 95,500 must be a clear strong break with volume, because it has resisted multiple times, and it is the one that acts as a watershed for another round level, which would be 100,000. So let's monitor these areas perfectly. So we have reached the end of this morning briefing. Please exercise maximum caution for all the news that will follow throughout the day. As always, I invite you to leave a like on the video, follow me on social media, and we'll catch up later in the chat. Thanks to everyone for your attention.